That's good. I'm now going to ask our drummer, because I have to make him happy since he keeps the time for me, to lead us off in this next song, if you don't mind. Oh, beautiful for heroes true in liberating strife. Who more than self their country love, and but she more in life than life. What I'm singing about tonight, this America, sweet America. May God thy gold refine and love you till all success be nobleness and every gain divine. And you know, when I was a little boy, we always sang these words. Oh, beautiful, far spacious skies, amber waves of grain, far purple mountains in majesty. Up on the pretty plain. Wait a minute. America, America. God shed His grace on thee. Oh yes, He did, and He crowned my good. He told me He would save His brotherhood from sea to shining sea. You know, I wish I had somebody just come a little bit along with me here.
Welcome back. David Penn here. You're at the Professor Penn podcast, episode number 124, Equality. We're going to discuss equality. And we've replayed America, the Beautiful, the Ray Charles version, because one of our valued listeners and viewers, NYC Freddie, came to me and said, man, you got to do the Lincoln Center version of this. And NYC Freddie was right on with that one because that was far superior to the version I played last week. So thank you, Freddie. And for any of the rest of you out there that have suggestions, comments, well, we're a community. We're all in this together, whether we like to admit it to ourselves or not. We have our individual redemption, but hey, we're in it together because we're in a representative democratic republic. So guess what? The future is up to all of us. I'm going to talk a little bit about equality tonight. Very important subject, obviously. And it goes back to this, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. We know this one. We've talked about it before. This is the kind of foundational philosophical bedrock for our country that makes me want to get up early in the morning and meet Tanner here. Good morning, Tanner.
Good morning, David.
I want to meet Tanner here to do this. Come in very early. I want to do this because these concepts, what underlies our daily life, what we don't think about, but what has developed over hundreds of years here in the United States of America is so righteous. And it's certain people go, well. What do you mean men? Where's the women? That's inherently misogynistic. And I agree. And all men are created. These people were enslavers. That was BS. And I agree. Because in every political formation, there's all kinds of different cross currents and factions. And politics is the art of compromise. So to create the kind of constituency that allowed the United States to extricate itself from empire, to resist and to overcome the greatest military force on the planet, which was the British Empire, a bunch of ragtag colonists. To do that, there was compromise. And I don't think that relative to men and women, that was a compromise because at that time, women were property just like slaves. Nobody was even thinking about it. The issue was about slavery. And within these documents, when you really study them, and I think we all need to, there is a process that allows us to form a more perfect union. So although there was a big constituency of founders that wanted a free society from day one, and they were forced to compromise, and that compromise was not resolved until 1865, even though that was there, they built into the system, into the philosophical bedrock, this process of continuous improvement, which we're living through to this day. And when something is good, this is what we were talking about Tim Pawlenty a couple weeks ago, because he endorsed this neocon cantaloupe, Joe Frazier, in this Senate race up here. And Tim Pawlenty was the former governor of Minnesota, and he was a centrist. I said, what is he? What is he? What is he? We don't know what he is because he's whatever he wants to be. Tim Pawlenty. We get people like that are, they're just not convicted. Their conviction is no conviction. These people that form this government that we live in, they're convicted. If you don't have any conviction, well, it says in the good book, not to wax biblical, it says that if you're lukewarm, God's going to spit you out. Because what's the point? But if you're convicted, if you have strong will, and if you're strongly convicted to goodness or to the search for truth, which we talk about, if you're new, thank you for joining, the search for truth. If you're really on that path, you're going to be beset by temptation to do the wrong thing. You're going to go wrong in learning how to do right. How are you going to ever be right if you never know what wrong is? And we talked about that in the last episode on redemption. The idea that a person who has actually gone out into the world and given up the search for truth and gone into the material world and really separated themselves from that search and then experiments with it and says, wow, this doesn't work, and goes back, they're actually got a deeper rut in truth than someone who never went out and lived in the world, never experienced the world. I mean, how can there's one thing to read it in a book, like our PhD secondhand jerk-offs that are in the universities. It's one thing to read it in a book. It's another thing to crawl through the mud. It's two completely different deals. Two completely different deals. So, a guy like Palenti, he was what was he? We didn't know what he was. He's whatever. Lukewarm. Doesn't matter. But these founders that started this country, there was such intense goodness there. And then, of course, it brought evil with it. Because wherever there's good, and all of you know this if you're in the search for truth, I know it. I look back on my life and think, whoa, whoa, whoa. Forgive me, my Father, for I have sinned. I mean, how else am I going to get to where I am today had I not experienced all the things that I've been through? And I was reflecting back on the last episode, and I'm thinking about my friend Jim in Salt Lake, uh, who cautions me about preaching restrictions. And I realized after that episode that I had gone kind of far into that, because I was talking about the pipe as a metaphor, as a kind of a way to think about being connected to the search for truth. And when you occlude it with behaviors that just occlude, I don't know why it's set up that way. It just is. I didn't make the world, but when my free will chooses to do things that narrow that pipe down, it's not good for my well-being, and it's not good for my search for truth. But I don't want to be a judge, and I don't want to be judgmental. And I know that everybody has to see it for themselves. So, someone that I really value that's following the podcast was talking about smoking dope, and that it helped him with his migraines, and it helps me with my anxiety. So, I mean, there's times in our lives, times in my life where I've used different crutches. I've done things that are incorrect for me, not for you, for me. Got to see it for ourselves. So I find myself giving up certain things that I've done, not because I'm judging against myself, but I want to go into this search for truth deeper. I want that experience. I want to see what happens over that next hill. I know what happens if I smoke dope every day. I know. I just know. What happens if I'm straight every day? Uh, how does that affect my ability to, I don't mean think or do, because it doesn't affect my ability to think or do, but in terms of my unseen life, what more information can I receive? What more search for truth can I ensue when I give up, for example, looking at porn, which is half the internet? I'm not saying you do or don't do it or it's right or wrong for you, for me. Because, came of age as my stepson. Man, Mrs. Professor Penn, her head was blowing off. This kid's not even 15 years old, and a young girl calls him up and asks him out on a date. The girl called him, asked him out. So he had his first date. And man, Mrs. Professor Penn, she was going nuts yesterday. I had to say to her, please don't take it out on me. And, here he is. He's a young man. I mean, I came of age in 1973. Hey, no girls called me up. I called them. the world's different. But there, he's going out, and I'm thinking to myself, where are we going with this one? Because this is this kid. He's very religious, and he's got a lot of talent. He's super talented musically, and I'm working with him physically, and he's a top student, and he's going to now start to experience this relationship life with women. How's that going to impact him? There's so many things we have to figure out. So whatever I've suffered, whatever mistakes I've made, how many times I've been knocked down, and I'm knocked down right now in a lot of ways, I get up. You ever been in a fight and got knocked down? I mean, really knocked down. I remember one time a guy hit me in the head. He was wearing a ring. I have almost perfect pitch. It was an E flat. I mean, that ring bounced off my skull and actually vibrated my head. And as I went down, because I got knocked semi-unconscious, I thought to myself, didn't knock me out all the way, but he did knock me down. Thought to myself, that's an E flat. And then I popped right back up because I didn't want him to kick the living snot out of me. And that's really important. Got to get up. We got to get up. We got to get up as a country. And that brings us around the corner to how are we going to get up as a country? What do we do when we get up? Because we either are going to lie down as a country and give up our self-governance. Funny. Tanner's saying to himself, how did he do that? How did I bring that one around the corner? It was pretty good,
Yeah,
wasn't
you
it?
can read my face.
Yeah.
I was actually just
He's
thinking
going, wow,
that.
how did you pull that one off? Because I didn't know where you were going with this. But we're knocked down as a country. Okay, we're just knocked down as a country. We've done all these different experiments. Think of them not as mistakes. Think of them as experiments. Experiments in free will. Experiments with the quality control and continuous improvement of our founding documents. And we've tried this, and we've tried that, and we're moving in a direction towards what? Equality. And what does that mean to the founders? It didn't mean we were all the same. They were rejecting empire where a king and a queen had a divine right. So a person that put their pants just the same, put their pants on their legs the same as me, used the toilet the same as me, grew old and died the same as me, but somehow they had the divine right of kings and queens to rule over me. They were rejecting that. That was their primary idea, that all men are created equal. And then derivative from that was white men had been imbued with a certain kind of supremacy that the country's been trying to work out and work through since 1776. That doesn't mean white men are inferior. It means that culturally there were certain norms, customs, traditions at that time that because of our continuous improvement, our quality control, we've had a chance to look at this. We're going to talk about that tonight because we have moved to equality, towards equality, and it's my work not to identify racism, anti-Semitism, sexism, homophobia, and xenophobia and say, oh, it's all your fault. It's all your fault. Tanner was just asking me before we came on, we got into a great conversation about whose fault this economy is. Because he was in a conversation with some of his family members, and they were saying, is this really Biden's fault? No, it's not Biden's fault. You could say this problem goes back to 1913. But it's his responsibility to fix it. Because right now, he's the chief executive officer of the company called the United States of America, which in fact is a corporation. So we'll talk about that someday. Doesn't matter whose fault it is. It's how are we going to stand up? How are we going to use our quality control mechanisms? Because if we stand up and do the same dumbass thing we've done for the last couple hundred years, we're going to fall down again. And something's going to make us fall down again. But let's fall down from something new. Let's not fall down from the same tired, pedantic BS that's been hanging us up for decades, at least since 1973. Blessed are you, God, and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the light and the dark. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating me in your image. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me an American. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me free. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for healing the blind. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for feeding the people. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for releasing the bound. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for raising up the downtrodden. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the heavens and earth. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for providing for all my needs. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for directing my path. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for providing for all my needs. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for our American courage. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for crowning America with glory. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for restoring strength to the weary. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for sending your only Son to die on the cross, that I might be saved. Forgive me, my Father, for I have sinned. Pardon me, my King, for I have willfully transgressed. For you pardon and forgive. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds, who is gracious and ever willing to forgive. And on this theme, we talked about fear and all of the things that we have to do as Americans to claim our American courage. And peacemaking, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight, because we are clearly on the verge of a much wider spreading of this world conflict that's going on. Israel is about to attack Lebanon. Nasrallah, who's the leader of the Hezbollah, has said that if that happens, no place in the world is safe. Remember that if Israel goes into Lebanon, which seems to be soon to happen, you got to pay attention what you're doing. And then we talked about redemption in the last episode, which I put up a picture on the thumbnail, picture of Christ on the cross. And interestingly, the episode didn't get a lot of views. So, that's always an experimentation. I thought, wow, we're going to put this up. We're going to get a lot of views, which, is kind of a crass thing on my part that I'm admitting to. But how do you express redemption? The word being freed. Redemption means to be freed, to be free, to be redeemed. From what are we being redeemed? Well, here's a good one. For you know that it was not with perishable things, such as silver or gold, that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ. I'm going to read it again, because this is thousands of years old. Isn't it interestingly appropriate today? For you know that it was not with perishable things, such as silver or gold, that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ. You see, now this is thousands of years old. And thousands of years ago, we had materialism and we had the search for truth. Wouldn't it be great if we could resolve this question and balance ourselves and really not identify racism and anti-Semitism and homophobia and xenophobia? Not just identify it and blame people, but actually use our quality control mechanisms and our continuous improvement mechanisms to resolve these issues. And one of the things I've been watching with, great interest and some shock and horror is I'm realizing that The candidacy of Mr. Royce White is somewhat of a Rorschach test for people. Wow. You want to talk about pulling in some racist comments. Are you on X? I'm asking for your help at profpennpodcast.com. Leland, thank you. And some of the other people whose names, like Susan, thank you. I'm going to start pulling more. Gabriel, thank you. Thank you. Because I'm out there without cover. And Royce, he's got more cover than me, but he needs even more cover from this Free the People radio audience. X is an intellectual and political battle space. And if I'm going to maintain who I want to be, which is a voice of conciliation, and these people go to savage me, like this woman, Preya, that's working for Joe Frazier, that actually, I say, I'm going to say it again, I'm so conflicted about this woman because she's not worth talking about. She's an idiot. She's a dunce. And I don't talk like this very often, but this woman has no boundaries. And she has no dignity, no honor. She'll say anything. She doesn't care if it's true or false. All she wants to do is manipulate the voters for her boss, Joe Frazier, who also must not care because he's hired her. If she worked for me, I'd fire her. Because she made an insinuation this few days ago that Royce was anti-Semitic. And that pissed me off. And I've been trying to avoid this woman. I mean, she's texting constantly. She's making fun of me, as if it bothers me. You can call me anything you want. In fact, we were talking about this. If I can do it, I'm going to play Elvis Presley's, Blue Suede Shoes next week, because you can say anything you want. You can do anything you want. Just don't step on my blue suede shoes. I love that one. We'll see if I can get it up because, of course, there's copyright issues. But making allegations of anti-Semitism against Royce, when this is such a potent issue about, Jews and anti-Jews in Israel and the Gazans, the Palestinians, this is so complicated and so necessary. It's so necessary that we as a community of Americans, American citizens, actually look at this issue, understand this issue, deal with this issue. We as American Jews look at this issue, understand this issue, and understand that there's a difference between Jews and anti-Jews, and then understand there's Jews that don't believe in Christ, and then understand there's Jews that do believe in Christ. And when you light that fuse of anti-Semitism, the people that kill Jews aren't going to they're not going to discriminate between anti-Jews and Jews that believe in Christ. They're not going to discriminate. And if you're a Jew that believes in Christ, you know what you really are? You're a Christian. I want you to contemplate that. That's why in the redemption piece, I only read comments about redemption from the Old Testament. Now I'm going to start to talk about what's in the New Testament, which is why I read that piece from Peter about redemption. But I want to say this again so we get this. There's anti-Jews and there's Jews that believe in Christ. There's self-described Jews that believe in Christ, and then there's Christians that believe in Christ. Those Christians are self-describing themselves as Christians, but in my opinion, knowing the Old and New Testament and the philosophy and the history of this thing, yeah, they're Christians, but they're practicing Judaism because Christ came not to overturn the law, but to fulfill it. Now, I understand it's its own religion. I get it. And like in the martial arts, we got Taekwondo and Tang Sudo and Subakdo and, Hapkido and Judo and, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And you want to know something? It's great to train in a lot of different systems. But when you get into a fight, there's no systems. There's only vertical and horizontal. So, as Bruce Lee famously said, don't tell me who your teacher was. It doesn't matter. Just can you fight? And that's like the search for truth. I mean, I've studied the Old Testament, I've studied the New Testament, I've studied the natural way, I've studied so many systems to create my own understanding. We're going to talk about that today. And I understand if you're a firmly convicted Christian, I'm not trying to get down on you. I'm just saying it's a continuum, and we have a taxonomy we identify to help us understand things like mind, body, and spirit. Like it's three separate things? Come on. It's one thing. We're a unity. It's like Judaism and Christianity. Yes, they're separate things, very separate, but it's a unity. We have to understand that polarity, that yin and that yang, how the world really works as a system, not how it works broken down by PhDs who get their PhDs by breaking things into segments and getting super specialized knowledge, like a doctor. Okay, you got a doctor. You got a doctor. Well, I got something wrong with my feet. I do. I have a bad Achilles tendon on my left foot from doing a lot of road work. It hurts. Can't walk on it sometimes. So what am I going to do if I want to get that checked out? Which I'm going to tell you I don't need to do that because I know how to heal it myself. But let's say I wanted to get it checked out. Well, I'm not going to go to a pulmonary specialist for my Achilles tendon. There are people that spend their entire lives studying Achilles tendons. And whatever they do with that, that's their expertise. That's their worldview. You ask them about, hematology. Well, they read a few paragraphs when they were going through medical school and they passed a test about it. But they're going to say, oh, you got a problem with your blood. Oh, I did your blood work. You better go see a hematologist. Because everything's so specialized. We've broken away from the unity. That's how people get their credentialization. So we've got a bunch of credentialized experts in very specific and narrow areas of study. But when it comes to the totality of things, some of them are really quite underinformed. So this prayer, with this anti-Semitism stuff, I hope you're watching me because I guess I'm going to pray for you that you investigate the search for truth. If you're a MNGOP officer, you're on a BPOU, I hope you're willing to go work to turn out the vote. This election is critical. It's critical because this is a peace or war election. Wherever you are, there's a primary, and then there's a general election. In Minnesota, the primary is on August 13th. Early voting starts in a week. We have an election season here in Minnesota. It's a very leftist state. Everybody gets access to the polls. Mail-in ballots, the whole deal. It's great. It's politics. Got to play the cards as they come off the deck. You can't just say, oh, those cards aren't fair. Knock that off. You want to change things? Go vote. Stop complaining and start voting. Get your list of 20 people. Have them get their lists of 20 people. Have downstream 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. Pretty soon it's millions throughout the country that are communicating and getting people out to the polls because we need to vote for peace. Let me say this again. Israel has approved a battle plan to attack Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. I don't know if this is true, but I haven't verified it, I read that Israel dropped more ordnance on Gaza than the total amount of ordnance dropped on Europe in World War II. Wow. And if you look at the pictures of what's left in Gaza, that seems quite possible. These are real wars. These are not little skirmishes like Grenada. These are wars where hundreds of thousands of people are dying. This war in the Ukraine could be 1 million people killed there. We don't know. We're not there. Can't trust any of the casualty counts because that's propaganda too. But millions of people are affected by this. Millions, tens of millions, maybe soon hundreds of. We're affected. It's affecting the cost of things we're going to go buy in the big box stores, which I'm going to talk about tonight. So if you're a MNGOP officer and you're on a BPOU, or let's say you're an officer of any party in any state, our job now is to get people to the polls, to take the people who are not motivated to go vote and get them to go vote. Why? Knock, knock, knock. Hi, my name is David Penn, and I represent you here in SD 45. I'm here for one reason. I want you to know that there's a primary on August 13th, and I'm going to ask you if you'd please go vote. Well, why do you say that? Well, because it's your ass. However you want to say it your own way. It's my ass. I could say it's my ass. I could make an I statement. I'm knocking on your door because I'm feeling that if we don't vote for peace, I'm afraid I'm going to have my children in a war. We're going to talk about that tonight. Got a lot of things to go through. Hey, if we run over a little bit, please stay with me. So we got to get to the polls. We got to elect peace candidates. You notice I'm not mentioning Royce's name specifically, but he's the peace candidate because his antagonist, the cantaloupe, the tomato can, his comment was, if Russians are allegedly, I didn't hear it with my own ears, I like to be careful about this, but it was reported to me by many different people that he's been walking around saying, if Russians are getting killed, I'm all good with it. I'm not good with anybody getting killed. Cain slew Abel. I'm not good with it. It's a reversal of love your neighbor as you yourself want to be loved. It's a reversal of what I believe in. It's a reversal of the search for truth. It's the belief that war and violence is who we are. That's what we are. That's our judgment. Let's move out that judgment. That's a BS story. That's why I like the guy that trained me. The guy was a very senior. He was the real deal. And I'm not talking, he was a real deal for the government, let alone, the guy was a player. But his thing was stop conflict. Stop it. First, you stop it in yourself. You self-reflect. You look in the mirror. You don't blame other people. You have power if you see yourself. When I see myself as the cause of things, I have some power to make some change. The best way to win a fight is not be there when the fight happens. Avoid conflict. There's no shame in running away to live to fight another day. Whatever we can do to lessen conflict, because blessed be the peacemakers. It's in our families. It's with our children. It's with our coworkers. That's why I try to be very respectful when I talk to people like this Preya, and then she comes back at me and makes fun of me. Terrible. Could you put up this picture of these three people? Oh, there they are. Here they come. Here comes some more for the cantaloupe. We got former State Senator Michelle Benson endorsing Joe Frazier. We got former Senate Majority Leader Paul Gazelka and U.S. Army Captain retired Kendall Qualls. So what do we got here? We got three people who aren't doing anything in politics. Benson's out, Gazelka's out, and Kendall never got in. Now let me make a comment about this. I talked about Michelle Benson the last time. I'll just remind you, the one time I really had a chance to befriend her, which I tried to do, she turned her back on me and walked away. Not the kind of behavior that is conducive to building a Republican political community. She's an elitist. I got a story about Paul Gazelka. Paul Gazelka was the former Senate Majority Leader of the Senate. He's an insurance agent from northern Minnesota. I had a meeting with him. He was late. Walked in to the meeting, and here's what he said. I'm late because I was golfing with the Chamber of Commerce. So he kept a whole bunch of folks waiting, and he walked in and said, geez, I'm late because I was golfing with the Chamber of Commerce. Now, for those of us that are on the nationalist side of the football, we know the Chamber of Commerce is a globalist organization that is in existence to represent the interest of the business community, which is an important community, which I'm part of. But that is not the most important thing we need to be working on. So I want to tell you, Mr. Gazelka, you insulted me, first by being late and making me wait a long time. And I did wait for you because I understand people get involved in things and politics is, not on a regimented schedule all the time. But I did wait for you for a long time. And it wasn't just me, it was a big group of people. We waited for you. No, all you had to do was come in and say, I'm sorry I'm late. I was detained at another event. And I wouldn't know. But you said that to insult the people in the room that were in the nationalist movement. You knew exactly what you were doing. You were insulting me. I felt insulted. And that's Mr. Gazelka. So now we know who he is. He's two-party insiders here, a former state senator and a former Senate Majority Leader. All they have told me for years is unity, 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 unity. And here we've got in Minnesota over 900 delegates endorsing a candidate, and these people are, creating conflict. That's who they are. So the next time when you tell me to be unified, I'm going to tell you to jam it up your ass because now we know who you are. And then we got Kendall Qualls, who I have no Kendall. I don't have anything really bad to say about Kendall or good to say about Kendall. Kendall wants to be a candidate. He's a rounder in Minnesota. He runs a lot. That's great. He's a very presentable guy. I like listening to him. But guess what his message is? The last time I went to a event where he had the stage. Unity, 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 so that we can beat Democrats. Unity, 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 unity. So I guess it's unity for me and not for thee. So you three have no credential anymore within the Republican Party of Minnesota because the Republican Party of Minnesota is overwhelmingly now pro-peace. And these three people have aligned themselves with globalism and war. Yes, you have. So now we can get their pictures off of there and we can all forget about them because they're done. And then we're going to go right into the news that matters. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dissolved the Israeli war cabinet after 2 of its 6 members resigned. He formed a unity war cabinet, a war advisory group to unify the country after that horrible event on October 7th last year. But it's fracturing. And Netanyahu has consolidated his power. Benny Gantz and his associate Gadi Eisenkot resigned from the body. And they resigned after Netanyahu effectively killed a ceasefire agreement that would have seen the release of the Israeli hostages. They left. Gantz and Eisenkot said, we're out. So the story around the campfire is that Netanyahu dissolved this body. This is going to blow your mind because he wanted to prevent even farther right ministers from filling the seats. So I want you to get your mind wrapped around this. We got the left in Israel. We got Netanyahu and his gang. And there's a group that's even farther right. Wow. And I do want to say on a sidebar, I have gone around on YouTube and I find these videos of very Orthodox Jews speaking in very racist ways and fashions. And I just want to tell you that wherever there's good, there's evil. And the people that I grew up with did not talk like that. Period. There's a word goy, for example, in Yiddish. It's a very disparaging word for non-Jews. My father, who was raised very religious, wouldn't let anybody use it around him. There's another very disparaging word. Schwarze refers to black people in the most kind of negative ways. My father didn't use that word just like it was the N-word, and if anybody used it, he got down on them with hobnailed boots. So things are not so simple. Are there disgusting people there? Well, I saw it and it was disgusting. But I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of very religious people that don't hold these kind of views. And that's why I want to go back to this anti-Semitism thing. Remember, there's anti-Jews that don't believe. They're Jews in name only, Ginos. There's Jews that don't believe in Christ. There's Jews that believe in Christ, and then there's Christians. And this thing, when it gets out of control, or let's say it gets into full control, it's my theory of the case that this whole thing, this whole secular humanism movement in our government is really about ending the search for truth and replacing it with technology. What do you think they're going to do to the people that believe? In Europe, the EU has imposed tariffs, duties on Chinese automobiles, electric vehicles, which are growing very quickly in Europe. But that's not going to stop the Chinese from succeeding in the automotive business in Europe. The highest tax was about 38%, 38.1% to be exact. That's not going to stop it. The technology is better. The cars look better. People want to buy them. This is something we got to get our brains wrapped around here, our minds wrapped around it. This is inflationary. And it's equalizing the price between Chinese manufactured vehicles and vehicles that are manufactured within the European Union. It's equality. But even though there's equality, some are better than others. So the consumer is able to pick what it is they want to buy. So what you want to buy, a Chevy Volt or a Tesla? You tell me. It's not going to stop the Chinese. The taxes are not high enough to end the business. It's just increasing the price and creating more tax revenue for the governments. It's a fight without a fight, right? We're all in on it. More tax for the government. More tax for what? To fund the war machine. Because all these governments now are upping their military spending throughout NATO. They're all going to be at that 3% level. Here in the United States, we're at 3%. We got, General Jack Keane on Fox advocating for 6% because we are at war after all, and we're going to talk about that. And it's not just that they can overcome that tax because of the quality of the goods. The Chinese are decentralizing their China-based manufacturing. They're going to open up automotive manufacturing right in Europe, just like they're going to open up automotive manufacturing right here in the United States or down in Mexico. As long as we have this globalized trade architecture, which is being pushed upon by nationalism, we're going to have Chinese growth and expansion. For example, the Chinese are betting big in South America, in Shanghai, Peru. It's a serene town on South America's Pacific coast. China is building a mega port that will challenge U.S. influence in the resource-rich region that we, the people, consider our backyard. No, the Chinese are moving in. It used to be in South America, Central America, Africa, that all the goods, the hard goods sold there, were built here in the United States or built in Europe. The Chinese have completely taken over the business because those countries don't have domestic manufacturing. So they're just looking for the best deal. So we're out and the Chinese have won. And why are they winning? Why are they winning? Well, ask yourself. Ask yourself how hard you work. Ask yourself, do you take Saturday and Sunday off? Do you take it easy on Friday afternoons? Christmas time, do you take 2 weeks off? Do you take a vacation? When you have a baby, do you take 3 months off? Chinese don't. Chinese go to work. I was in the office this morning at 6:05. I'll go home. I'll quit working tonight at 10 o'clock. That's my generation. And within my generation, I'm a particularly hard worker. I like it. Or I'm brainwashed into it. Maybe I'm using it to avoid certain issues. Actually, I'm not. I actually am a warrior, and I'm going to stand up. I'm going to stand up in my tire business. Thank you for going to tireget.com. I always forget about it, but we're going to be deploying this week $2 billion of inventory, every tire at the right price. We'll mount them for you right at your local installation center, 5 minutes from your house. You can call in. I'll help you with the customer service. It's the slickest, coolest tire buying experience in the tire business. And we're going to do what? We're going to fund the movement with it. So please, in a typical e-commerce environment, you hope to get 1/10 of 1% return. This audience, and the Please Call Me crazy audience, and the Hebrews audience, which is hundreds of thousands of people, please, every one of you want to support what we're doing here. You buy tires, your kids buy tires, your spouse is buying tires, your friends are buying tires. Hey, it could be that list of 20 people. Send them to tireget.com. That's TIREGET.com. And let's fund the movement. I'm going to stand up. I'm not going to be put down. And we're going to make this movement work. That's why I'm working so hard. I need your help. I'm asking for you to go to X. I'm asking for that list of 20 people. I'm asking you to buy tires from Target. I got a lot of asks and needs and wants. Please help. I know you like the content. Thank you so much. But the Chinese have taken over because they work harder. They just work harder. And they got a lot of countermeasures. The Chinese have launched anti-dumping probes on pork imports from Europe as a response to these electric vehicle tariffs that have been imposed. So if you're a farmer in the EU, hey, you got problems. According to Bloomberg, this will be viewed as Beijing's counter to similar investigations being conducted by the EU, which is looking at Chinese subsidies across a wide range of industries. Europe's pork exports to China amounted to $1.83 billion last year, with farmers in Spain, Denmark, and Netherlands benefiting the most. But in the grand scheme, pork exports to China are only a mere fraction of the overall trade between the EU and China. Last year, China imported $282 billion worth of goods from the EU. But every month and every year, the trade barriers are ratcheting up. And so far, it's just more tax revenue. But at a certain point, it could flip over into a full-blown separation in the trade blocs. For example, the United States has just imposed even more sanctions on Russia, and that's given the markets the jitters. There's been a sharp escalation in sanctions by the Treasury Department. That'd be we the people's, our Treasury Department. And that's prompted former President and Prime Minister of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, he's now a senior security official, to call upon the Russian population to, quote, inflict maximum harm on Western societies and infrastructure in retaliation. The sanctions targeted companies based in China also that have been selling semiconductor chips to Russia, as well as more than 300 individuals and entities in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Medvedev, who has become one of the most vociferous Russian officials in condemning the West, called on all Russians to, quote, look for vulnerabilities in important technologies and strike them mercilessly. Wow. Quote, we must find problems in their most important technologies and strike them. Literally destroy their energy, industry, transport, banking, and social services. That's called war. And Vladimir Putin weighed in on this because at this Group of Seven meeting, Zelensky and Biden signed an agreement that was funded with confiscated interest on assets, $270 billion of assets that are deposited, Russian funds deposited in Western banks. Putin was cool about this. He addressed the move during a speech before his Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He denounced this brazen theft, and he described that the Western leaders are trying to come up with, quote, some kind of legal basis for the asset freezes and the interest theft, quote, but despite all their trickery, theft is still theft and will not go unpunished. Theft, slavery, drugs, piracy. This is the piracy section of the British business model. President Biden had said, I'm very pleased to share that this week the G7 signed a plan to finalize and unlock $50 billion from the proceeds of those frozen Russian assets to put that money to work for the Ukraine. Another reminder to Putin that we're not backing down. In other words, they're using Russian money to kill Russians. And that piss you off, wouldn't it? That piss you off. That would piss you off. Alexander Bespalov, co-chair of the Investment Russia, was quoted on this plan, quote, "The idea of issuing any loans to Ukraine is inherently hopeless because only a person who is extremely detached from life and reality can suppose that it may win a conflict with Russia. Ukraine is already in a losing position." Great. In the meantime, the Houthis have actually sunk a bulk carrier in the Red Sea that happened to be carrying Russian coal. Isn't that fantastic? And all of this economic chaos associated with war, which is inflation, because war is inflationary, and logistics disruptions, which is inflationary, this is going to pour in upon you and me, we the people, over the next months. Now, I know this because I import stuff and can't get stuff on boats because here's what's happened. The interest rates were raised to quell inflation, allegedly. I don't believe that. I don't think the interest rates being raised was to quell inflation. I think they were raised to wipe out the supply chain and centralize power in the hands of a few large and favored companies like Amazon, Walmart, Target, and then all the small business people, which are essentially the backbone of the Republican Party, we're all going broke. Because at 8% interest, with the borders open and the Chinese undercutting everybody's pricing, can't make any money. There's no money to be made. So I'm importing. And when that interest rate went up, I cut my inventories because I couldn't afford to pay the VIG. And so did everybody else, including Target and Walmart. And when this disruption started with the Houthis, the Houthi and the Blowfish, and and they're killing people now. So it's no longer bottle rockets. They're actually shooting real explosives at these ships, and they're damaging them and they're killing people. It's disrupted the worldwide globalized network of shipping. And the price of moving a container on what they call the spot market. So there's people that have direct contracts like Target does. And then there's people that are a little bit downstream from me and they buy from freight wholesalers. The spot market, man, it was $3,000 to go from Asia to Houston in January. It's $10,000 today, $9,000. It's crazy. And for people like me that have contracts, I can't get the space because the system's so disrupted. So I'm left with two options: wait for space and run out of product, or pay the troll to get across the bridge. Pay the troll to get across the bridge. It's really tough on the supply chain, particularly the smaller companies. And it's all driven by fear. And here's how it's being driven. If you're a 45-year-old purchasing agent at a major company, like an Amazon, you're not in the search for truth like Professor Penn is. You're not spending all your time reading 11 newspapers every day. You're busy. You got a big job. You're flipping on CNN. And what is CNN telling me? Oh, the economy's fantastic. Like this ding-dong Will Stencil here in Minnesota. Everything's going great. It's Every time I do this, I have to say, Tanner, is the economy doing good for you?
No, it sucks.
It sucks, right?
It sucks.
I mean, you just got to be a person. But if you're watching the news, I watch news, I think, God, how could I be this stupid? I'm not making any money. And everybody's making all this money. But the truth is nobody's making any money unless you're in the war business or the high-tech business. Hey, those people that are bringing in the technocracy, oh, they're kicking it. In other words, the people that are in the fascist formation where government policy is favoring your business, hey, you're doing great. But the system is so disabled, and it could get worse. It probably will get worse. It's a big system. Let us hope and pray it resolves. How will we really know it resolves? we go out and knock on doors and get people to the polls and the primaries to vote for peace candidates. People say Trump is in on it. Well, okay, he might be. I don't know. I don't know what's in the guy's head. But I know in the 4 years that he was president, we didn't have any of these kind of dramas. The Russians didn't attack Ukraine. The Iranians didn't shoot 300 missiles at Israel. There was no incursion into Israel by Hamas. Nobody did these things. Maybe they thought he was crazy and they were afraid of him. But you remember those images of him going and shaking hands with Kim Jong-un in North Korea? Well, guess what? If you go online, you're going to see Putin is shaking hands with Kim Jong-un this week. That's right. Not President Biden. He didn't go there. He didn't maintain the relationship that President Trump started with Kim Jong-un. He didn't maintain, President Biden, the Abraham Accord action. It fell apart. It fell apart. I don't know why it fell apart specifically. I mean, we could sit here for a full podcast. I could give you all kinds of different reasons what might have contributed to it falling apart. But as I was saying to Tanner, it doesn't matter how it happened. The man is hired to fix it. And is it being fixed? Do you see things getting better?
Hell no. Hell no. I was gonna say slightly, but that's just because it's not winter anymore, so everybody's moving. But at the same time, everything's still so expensive. I'm probably not buying a house. It's not better.
Great. Isn't that fantastic? Got a young person with a family, a child, a woman that he loves, can't buy a house. Unbelievable. I even see advice from the pundits that have this, you shouldn't buy a house. Young people, don't buy your first house. Be a debt slave. Man, the entire system is crumbling. It really is. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation's most recent report released last week tells me, when I read it, that there are 63 quote-unquote problem banks in the United States, and that collectively our banks now have $517 billion in unrealized losses. I would like to know if my bank is on that list, but guess what? The FDIC does not say who's on the list, because if I knew my bank was on the list, I would take all my money out of there, which would make sure that bank was going to fail the next day. There'd be a bank run. You do the same thing. If you knew that you had your money in one of these 63 problem banks, you'd get your money out of there. The bank would fail. So they're not telling us, but the problem's still there. And it's going to get worse because there's a commercial real estate crisis. All you got to do is go to your downtown area in the big city in your backyard. It started with COVID. Everybody started working at home. So who wants to go downtown and commute and park and all that? We got all that remote working now, which is this. Believe me, there's no remote working in China. These people show up for work at 7 a.m. on Monday morning. They work 6 days until they go, from the minute they wake up till the minute they go to sleep, they're working. You're going to say, how can they live like that? Well, they're materialists. They want the money, but they're going to do whatever it takes to stand up. Their culture was down. They were the weak man of Asia for centuries. They have pride. They have spirit. They want their country to succeed. They want to have families. They want to have good lives. They remember poverty. They remember the last time their currency failed. People my age, the currency failed in their lifetime, which we're going to talk a little bit about soon. Because, in 1949, when Mao defeated the Kuomintang and Chiang Kai-shek ran down to Taiwan, which has created this current problem, the currency failed. 49. There's a lot of people alive in China that were alive in 1949. They remember. And they remember the poverty associated with the Maoist period. People were starving to death. They're going to work and do whatever they can to keep. We've had prosperity in this country so long, we don't realize it's based on the hard work of the generations that came before us. This current time, truth be known, I'm not working as hard as I used to. I don't go home, but Friday afternoons I meet A good friend of mine, we have McAllen every Friday afternoon. I didn't used to do that. Christmas used to start on Christmas Eve at about noon. Now Christmas starts before Thanksgiving. I mean, for me too, because you can't swim upstream if nobody else is working. Who am I going to deal with? But you can call me and buy tires on TireGet. For you, I'm available. But there's a commercial real estate crisis. Over $1.2 trillion of commercial real estate debt is going to mature over the next 2 years, and most of this real estate is bust. It's bust. The commercial real estate portfolio in this country is worth $3 trillion. It's got to be written down to $2 trillion. I mean, we got a crisis brewing here. And small business, I'm telling you, this is just horrible for small business. These kind of interest rates. It's estimated that 46% of all employees in the United States, that's around 61.6 million people, are employed by the pejoratively titled small business. Think what an ominous sign it's going to be if this continues. Because people are going to start going bankrupt now in droves. A whopping 408,000 small business jobs were lost just last month. Retailers are super in trouble. They're really struggling. A slew of retailers reported negative year-over-year sales. Just to name a few, Target, Lowe's, Macy's, Kohl's, Best Buy, Foot Locker, their sales are all down year on year. Even Walmart's closing stores. So they can keep reporting on CNN how great things are, but the facts are the facts. And, you know, these people that are working in these big box stores that are looking on CNN for their news, oh, everything's great. Everything's great. And then, you know, they cut their inventories because of the interest rates. And then there was a little restriction because of the Houthis, and they bought these boats out. So guess what's coming? Inflation. More inflation. Just in time for the election. There's no way to hide this one, because when you go from 3,000 to 9,000 to get a container over here, in the tire business, that's about 15% price increase. Isn't that great? Well, Robert Kennedy Jr. has a solution for all this. Robert Kennedy Jr., at a speech that he gave this week, proposed to vastly scale back the military budget, and he proposes listen to this. This is not what you call futzing around at the edges. He's proposed I wish I had a drum roll. Maybe you can get it in.
All right, drum roll, please.
A 50% reduction in military spending if he's elected president. I fumbled that. I'm going to do it again. It's so staggering, I can't get it out well. Let me try it again. A 50% reduction in military spending if he is elected president. He said this would lead to a stronger, smarter, and better targeted national defense. He said that would benefit the U.S. economy by reallocating that money to reducing the $34 trillion national debt and addressing domestic issues such as education, small business development, and infrastructure. Quote, if we use those savings to rebuild our country in every way, we will reverse spending that is a constant drain on our nation's vitality. Well, guess what happened then? President Biden's spokesperson, Matt Corradoni, who works for the DNC, not really President Biden's spokesperson, he's the DNC spokesperson, but it's really one and the same. Listen to what President Biden did. He condemned Mr. Kennedy's plan to defense cuts. Quote, with Russia, North Korea, and the Chinese Communist Party all watching, RFK Jr. is more than eager to peddle Kremlin's talking points, just like Donald Trump. He can't be trusted to stand up for allies against totalitarianism. Or as George Kennan said, the Soviet Union was to sink under the ocean, the U.S. national military industrial complex would have to invent a new enemy because the U.S. economy could not handle peace. That's where we're living. That's called hell. Mr. Kennedy chastised U.S. foreign policy, stating that he believes it's stuck in a world that doesn't exist because the country, that's you and me, we believe, quote, we're still the world's only superpower and can bend any nation to its will. Sounds like he's listening to the Professor Penn podcast. Makes me feel good to know I'm not completely alone. Because when you're on X and you're talking to these neocons, you recognize these people have never been out of their own bedrooms, sitting behind their keyboards, tapping away. I've been out of this country, around this world, hundreds of times. I've been in Vietnam. I've been in Japan. I've been in China. I've been in Turkey. I've been in Central America. I've been in France. I've been in Canada. I've been in Mexico. I've been a lot of places. I've talked to lots of people. If we were a righteous country, really, truly righteous, people would follow the righteousness without the intimidation of sanctions. I just want to talk briefly about Taiwan before I get to the real deal here today. Taiwan, I'm going to have to come back to this because we don't have the time. I'm going to run over too far. We all need to study the history of Taiwan. We went through that history of the Ukraine because we blame the Russians for something that we created. Well, Taiwan was an independent place, was then occupied by the Japanese. That ended after World War II because, of course, the Japanese were defeated. And during the period that there was the World War II with the fight of the Japanese in China, there was two factions within China. Just like that we have nationalists and globalists, they had that over there too. The globalists at that time was called the Kuomintang. And the nationalists that cared about the well-being of the people, that was the Maoists, the communists. And they had a fight back and forth, fight, and they fought the Japanese together. When the Japanese were defeated, the Maoists, the communists, defeated the Kuomintang, which was, a globalist group that was in it for the money. That was an oligarch group. They were exploiting the people. That's why the people won. And what did they do when they lost that war? They ran down to Taiwan and they killed a bunch of native Taiwanese, and they took the place over. So we need to understand that the people in Taiwan, those Chinese people in Taiwan, they're transplants. They came from the mainland and they went to Taiwan. And I'm going to tell you, having been in China many, many, many times, the people that stayed in the mainland, they don't like those people. Because not only did they run away, but they ran away with the money. They took the wealth of China with them when they left. Did anybody ever stop and wonder why Taiwan is so important to the world economy? It's because they robbed the Chinese people. So Chinese people robbed, slavery, drugs, and piracy. There it is again. You ask the average Chinese person on the street, they have no love for the Taiwanese. They'd be very happy to turn Taiwan into a parking lot. Tanner, just to give a little taste for this, could you please play number 3?
输血管东部战区为台岛东部附近海空域开展模拟打击、机动巡查等演练，展示了联合夺权、要道战控能力，传递了解放军可多项对台港口、机场等重要目标勘制射打信号。另一方面呢，就是拒止台独外援团。台岛以东啊，一直被台独势力看作是庇护所。这次东部战。
That's what the Chinese people are seeing on the nightly news over there. So to say that we're not getting fired up for war, It's our military that's over there. We are in their backyard. They're not in our backyard. But the Russians, who were actually funding a war, and we're actually in a war with the Russians in a proxy war, they actually put their warships right off of the coast of Florida. Oh, everybody's upset about that. Well, let me give you a blast. Those submarines have always been off the coast of the United States. They've just surfaced to let we, the people, know that this is not as simple as we think. Because, the people my age, we, the boomers, we think that our will be done, that our self-image. I was thinking about doing a whole segment on this, the self-image of the boomers. You have many younger people. We think we're badasses. We think that whatever we want to do, we're going to get done. Because we're the United States of America. We defeated the Nazis. Hey, that's a long time ago. We now live in a multipolar world. That's what Kennedy was saying. But our country is run by the military-industrial complex that is continuing to pervade this myth that we're large and in charge. We're not negotiating. As I said in the last podcast, Putin just made a peace offering. And we think, well, hey, brush him aside. He's weak and feckless. I mean, that's what people think. I read it on X all the time. And you got all these Ukrainian propaganda outlets saying, he's weak and feckless. The Russians are losing. The Russians are losing? Huh. If the Russians are losing, why do we have to put all this money in the deal? Why are all these weapons going in there? Why is the ante going up? Why are all these countries initiating the draft? And that's what we want to finish up here with, the draft and women's suffrage. There's quite a battle between the sexes. And of course, I'm not supposed to think about that. I'm not supposed to think about it. I'm not even supposed to talk about it. But until 1920, women did not vote in this country. Do you know that? Did you know that, Tanner?
Yeah, I knew that.
Isn't that awful?
It's pretty bad.
Awful.
I'm just surprised that was not that long ago.
It's 100 years ago.
Yeah. So that was something that blew my mind because I learned it in history, but then I'm just terrible at remembering dates. So then as I got older, in my mind, I'm like, well, that was the 1800s. No, it was literally just 100 years ago.
In China, women were property till 1949. The slaves were freed in 1865 or 1864. When you take groups of people and they get abused, when they get abused, because slavery or being property is abusive. Just like I'm a debt slave, I'm not complaining about very much because I'm keeping my personal power so that I can get out of it. But, man, I mean, it's not unreasonable for people to be pissed about these things. And the Democrat Party is expert in taking groups that are aggrieved, grievance politics, and creating constituencies among those groups. And the Democrats, they're the globalists. The Democrats are the free trade party. Free trade is globalism. No borders. And what is the ultimate free trade? Slavery. And who were the Democrats? That was the group that seceded from the Union, the Confederacy. That was the Democrat Party. Who fought and freed the slaves from the grips of these Democrats? That'd be the Republican Party. Why don't we know that? Do you know that, Tanner?
Yeah, Abraham Lincoln was Republican.
You know that.
Yeah.
How about your friends? Do they know that?
Now they do, because I've talked about that. That's usually what I explain myself as like, oh, I feel like I'm a Republican, but more of like an Abraham Lincoln styled Republican.
That would mean we were preserving 1776 instead of 1946. Conservatives. So the Democrat is this globalist party. They're great on the politics of grievance, what we call identity politics. And what identities do they use to achieve their globalist aim? Well, first it was the Jews, because, man, the Holocaust, that's a good card to play. I'm sorry to my Jewish brothers and sisters. Why are we Democrats in the Jewish community? Well, that's because the Republicans were viciously anti-Semitic. I even experienced it here in my Republican Party here in Minnesota. It exists to this very day. That's why I say we got to solve these issues, not continuously use them, solved them. The Jews, the formation of Israel, the use of the Jews to maintain the British business model of slavery, drugs, and piracy, to be a forward firing base to protect the Suez Canal and the oil reserves in the Middle East. Oh, and we got a country too. Isn't that great? And look how well that's worked out for the world. But the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, and the black people, slaves, discrimination. You know, what could be more illustrative of the problems of our country than the discrimination of the white male majority exploiting black people and the depraved conditions in which black people had to live and still in many cases are living? How depraved. So Democrat Party picks up the black people. Great. Fantastic. Women couldn't vote till 1920? Come on. It's crazy. And then we've got the LGBTQ plus people. 4 groups that are being used in this identity politics thing. And I'm going to tell you, I'm in this X thing, and man, these people are brutal. I mean, they don't even want to talk. There's no policy conversation. It's all emotional. They hate me. They hate me. They don't even know me. They hate me. It's very depressing. Well, we also have this draft. I mean, I'm looking at how are we going to work out of this, and I'm going to talk about some things that are very difficult. Very difficult. So we had this women's suffrage. I believe in equality. I love that all men are created equal. All women are created. We're all equal. We're all equal. We're all equal in the eyes of God, and there's certainly no kings and queens. And you take a look at these globalists that are in the universities, or these titans of industry, or the Michelle Bensons, or the Paul Gazelkas. They think they're better than me. You know, how do I know that? Well, these two, they acted that way to me. They just acted that way. I mean, their condescension was evident in how they talked to me. Condescending. I don't want to be condescending. I remember one of my forefathers said to me, "You got to be nice to everybody, Mr. Penn." Because, I come out of that academic background and I must have been a little condescending. And this guy who was teaching me beat me down about that. He said, "You got to be nice to everybody all the time." And if we really believe we're all created equal and we want to treat our neighbors as we wish to be treated, then that makes a lot of sense to me. So I really am that way now as much as, and when I'm not, I apologize. So we have these different classes, and each one of these classes has an axe to grind. And they grind away, and it's very effective. It's very effective. And I'm always seeking ways that we can rebalance this thing. So how are these two things related, the draft and women's suffrage? Well, this past week, the House of Representatives in our country passed the annual defense policy bill. And it was $883 billion, National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA. It moved forward on a vote of 217 to 199. In other words, hey, got to fund the military. It's close, though, isn't it, in the House? 217 to 199. Go vote in your primary and vote for peace. Let's vote for people that are going to cut this ridiculous expenditure, which is inflationary and which is robbing from the health and well-being of the American citizens. Only 3 Republicans opposed it, man. I mean, come on. Got a long way to go. Got a long way to go. But in that bill was an amendment that, listen to this, automatically registers all draft age male U.S. residents for the draft 18 to 26 years old. You're not going to have to go do it voluntarily or by law, they're just going to use the databases and you're registered. So I know I got a lot of young people watching the podcast. This hasn't passed yet, but when they reconcile it with the Senate and it passes, you're being registered for the draft. And why would we do that unless they see war over the next hill? Because they do. Just like when Tom Emmer passed this debt ceiling bill, which is racking up $1 trillion every 100 days until January 2nd, 2025, they knew they were going to need the money. That's why they lied to us. This is buried in the law. I found it. You didn't. You're going to get drafted unless you vote for peace. Does that make you motivated to go to the polls on August 13th? How old are you, Tanner?
I'm 24.
24. You want to die in a war?
No.
Are you going to go vote in the primary?
Yeah. Probably.
Last time you weren't sure.
I said probably.
Probably is not sure.
Well,
let me read this again to you, Tanner. I want you to get you said, I want to know what's going on.
I'm not going to vote out of fear. And that's what this feels like.
Fear? Fear.
Yeah, fear of dying and going to war. I don't want to do that. And I got to censor all my own words.
That's great. We had a little laugh around the studio here this morning. That's great. So this isn't enough for me to close you. You see how hard it is to close people on going to vote in a primary? I'm going to read this again to you. This amendment automatically registers. Automatically. You have no free will. You'll be automatically registered for the draft. Automatically.
Oh, I'm already registered. So.
Did you go register voluntarily?
Well, I had to for my college loans.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Yeah, so convenient. How
Another
they have that
government
set up.
program.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, they're doing this because not everybody has college loans, right?
Yeah.
They're making sure everybody's registered because, see, they're looking over the next hill and they see what's happening in Europe and they see what's happening in the Middle East and they see what's happening over in the South China Sea and they're saying, whoa, we're going to war. War's good business. Not for Tanner, not for Professor Penn, but for the people that are behind this stuff, it's good. Now,
what sucks is I can't even like this. They're considering women now. I can't throw on a wig and call myself Tammy and get out of it.
Well, that's where I'm heading with this. You didn't know where I was heading. See, this happened. This was a great segue because Tanner's taking the words right out of my mouth. Because women are not going to be automatically registered. But interestingly, there is a group in the Congress that wants to register women. And, women, Royce excoriated me about this on Hebrews that'll be up Friday night. He said that the machine manufacturers consent and agreement. That's not really there. He said there's a lot of women that aren't involved in this. And I agree with them. Women are not hegemonic. But I do think more women vote for the globalists and borderless Democrats than vote for nationalists because of the women's health care issue. Would you agree with that statement that most of the women your age are going to vote on the Democrat side of the football?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the numbers show that, do they not?
Even trusting numbers is tough now, but I have a sense for it just from my own district, just from talking to people. Well, my point is this, which I'm going to get blowback on, but, women are going to vote Democrat. And if they don't have to go to war and they can send my son to war, they'll continue to vote Democrat because they'll have equality or supremacy, but they won't have to bear the bitter fruit of their political decisions. So one of the things that might happen that could rebalance our country to the search for truth, to a culture of life, to a culture of peace, is if women were drafted also and were forced to fight by their government. Because you know what's going to happen if that was reality? They would not vote for the Democrat. They would vote for peace. Because the Democrat, the globalist, either the Republican Party or the Democrat, like those three harpies, Qualls, Benson, Gazelka, three Democrats disguising themselves as Republicans, borderless warmongers, they wouldn't get elected. They wouldn't have a future in politics if women had to bear the bitter fruit of their vote. But right now they're protected. But they have equality. We have suffrage. We're righting the wrongs through the quality control and the continuous improvement method of our founding documents. And then I'm going to go out with this and come back to it. Because this is another reason why people are having a problem with the nationalist movement, which is America a Christian nation? Because Putin's wrapping his imperial ambitions, his military ambitions in Christianity, and we've done that here in this country off and on since the beginning of the country. I'm not going to be able to get through it because I've gone 90 minutes. But I'm going to just say going out, and I know we see it I see it in the live chat. Are we a Christian country, or are we Americans? And a person is Christian, and a person is Muslim, a person's Jewish, and a person's atheist, a person's agnostic, but we're united in our citizenship, in our adherence to and our love of the founding documents of the country, which of course no one is taught in school anymore because they, the globalists that control the education system, which is leftist, they want us not to know the glory of our historical past so that they can separate us into grievance groups and make us hate ourselves and each other because, it's divide and conquer. And that's what they've done. They, the Democrat Party, be they in the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, they're globalists. They're borderless globalists. And I don't see the world this way. Christianity for me is a way to train. It's a way for me to find the search for truth. Just like being trained in the military, or being trained in military matters. Yeah, you learn how to defend yourself and to kill, but even if you're actually defending yourself, there's something greater to it than the training. I was trained in Judaism. There's something greater to it than Judaism. There's something here that we can find, something we can all find if it's in our educational system, which it's not. They just don't teach us to think, if I was made king, the first thing I would do is retool our pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, and elementary education so people were taught about really what's going on here. And it's just esoteric knowledge. It's thought to be the knowledge of secret societies, but the only reason it's a secret is because they don't want everybody to be free. You can't get a job in government controlling people and have a nothing job and live a good life and rob, steal, and basically do nothing if people are self-governing, if people can defend themselves, if people can fend for themselves. Then, that's what we're doing here. Are we going to be self-governing or are we going to be governed? So we're going to come back to this next week. We just didn't get to it. And I'm going to ask you to think about it. Are we a Christian nation or are we an American nation? Let's think about that. If you have some thoughts, put it in the comments. Help me think this thing through. And we really have to consider, how are we going to coalesce a constituency of Americans that are searching for truth together, whatever their identity is? What's going to bring us together so we can defeat those that would usher in an anti-human globalist reality? Very critical. I'm going to go out with a beautiful piece of music. We've played Johnny Cash on here. We're going to go out with the Johnny Cash piece. And I just want to read. Look at all this material I didn't get through. Boy, I certainly get why Alex Jones goes for 4 hours. There's just so much to talk about. Johnny Cash has a beautiful song called Like a Soldier. With the twilight colors falling and the evening laying shadows, hidden memories come stealing from my mind as I feel my own heart beating out, the simple joy of living, and I wonder how I ever was that kind. But the wild road I was rambling was always out there calling, and you said 100 times, I should have died. Then you reached down and touched me and lifted me up with you, so I believed it was a road I was meant to ride. I'm like a soldier getting over the war. I'm like a young man getting over his crazy days, like a bandit getting over his lawless ways. I don't have to do that anymore. I'm like a soldier getting over the war. Study these lyrics because everything I need to know about what I'm going through is in this song, Like a Soldier. Thank you very much. I wish you well. I wish you a great weekend. Look forward to your comments, to your suggestions at Prof Penn Podcast on X. I'm asking you to join. Have a great weekend. Thank you very much.
Have a good night, everybody.
With the twilight colors falling and the evening lay in shadows, hidden memories come stealing from my mind. And I feel my own heart beating out the simple joy of living, and I wonder how I ever was that kind. But the wild road I was rambling was always out there calling, and you said 100 times I should have died. Then you reached down and touched me and lifted me up with you, so I believe it was a road I was meant to ride. I'm like a soldier getting over the war. I'm like a young man getting over his crazy days, like a bandit getting over his lawless ways. I don't have to do that anymore. I'm like a soldier getting over the war. There are nights I don't remember, and pain that's been forgotten, and a lot of things I choose not to recall. There are faces that come to me in my darkest secret memories, faces that I wish would not come back at all. But in my dreams parade of lovers from the other times and places, there's not one that matters now, no matter who. I'm just thankful for the journey, and that I survived the battles, and that my spoils of victory is you. I'm like a soldier getting over the war. I'm like a young man getting over his crazy days, like a bandit getting over his lawless ways. Every day gets better than the day before. I'm like a soldier getting over the war.